Well, hey there, it's Mr. Thompson here with a video math lesson. This is a video in a series on probability and statistics as well, and the subject this time is tree diagrams. So we're going to look at an example of a situation which it is useful to draw a tree diagram. So for this little experiment, we will be talking about flipping a coin and what can happen when you flip a coin a couple of times. So when you flip a coin, you can either get heads or, of course, tails, whichever lands facing up or whatever. We're going to assume that those are the only two options. It can't land on its side or anything like that. There's two options, heads or tails. Okay, so to draw a tree diagram, it kind of looks like this. We're going to write out the first flip, and we sort of have these branches, right? It branches out from the beginning for each option, hence the name tree diagram because of the so-called branches. So for our first flip of the coin, we can get a heads or a tails. Okay, those are our two options. And what we want to do for each kind of flip, we can look, if we want, we can look at the probability for each of each option here. So there's two possibilities, and there's one heads and one tails, and that determines our probability. The probability of getting a heads, well, there's one heads, one option that has a heads, and there's two total options, so the probability is 1/2. Okay, same thing for tails. There's one possibility to get tails out of two, so probability of 1/2. So that's our probability for each option on the first flip. You don't have to do the probability each time unless you want to. So for the second flip, we'll see what can happen if we flip a coin twice. Well, the first time, if we got heads, the next flip we could get, again, heads or tails. Both options are still totally possible. Okay, and as well, if we get a tails the first time, we could still get a heads or a tails. Now we can go through and look at what our probabilities are. And really what we're doing here is we're looking at the combinations. So two heads, right? What's the probability of getting two heads? Well, one of these, let's look at the rest of the possibilities. You could get heads and heads, or heads and tails, and then here's another kind of heads and tails, but it was tails first and then heads, or tails and tails. Okay, so what are the probabilities of each one of these? Well, there's four options now. Okay, only one of them has two heads. Okay, so one possibility of getting heads twice out of four, so the probability is 1/4. Now, to get a heads and a tails, we're not going to worry about what order they came in. Okay, if it's a heads and a tails or tails and a heads, that's kind of the same thing. It's one of each. Okay, so there's actually two possible ways to get a heads and a tails. Okay, so that's 2 out of 4, and so that of course reduces to 1/2. Okay, so the probability of getting a heads and a tails is 1/2. And finally, just like two heads getting two tails, there's one possible way of getting that out of 4. Okay, so that's 1/4. So that's the second flip and the probabilities. And let's look at if we did a third flip. Okay, and as before, with each previous situation, we could again get heads or tails for each other previous situations. And if we look at what we're getting here, heads, heads, heads. Okay, heads, heads, tails. Right, heads, tails, heads. Right, then heads, tails, tails. And likewise all the rest of these, right? Here's all our possibilities, different combinations of heads and tails. And what we can do with this is then say, okay, what is the probability of getting 3 heads? How many ways are there of getting 3 heads? Well, there's only one way. Only one of these has all 3 heads, okay? So 1 out of 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the probability of getting 3 heads is 1/8, okay? What about this one? Here we have 1 tails and 2 heads. Okay, and again, we're not worrying about the order. So how many times is there 1 tails and 2 heads? Here's one. Here's another. 1 tails, 2 heads, and here's another. So that is 3 different ways. Okay, so to get 2 heads and 1 tails, there's 3 different ways out of the 8. So the probability is 3/8. Okay. This is the same as that, so we'll move on to the next one. We've already covered this one. But what about two tails and one head? Well, here's one, here's another, and here's a third. So it also, one heads and two tails is also 3/8. Okay, now we've covered all the situations except this last one, 3 tails, and there's only one way to get 3 tails, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 8, 1/8. One thing you'll notice about these probabilities is that for any row, if we take the first flip, they add up to 1. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1. Here, 1/4 plus 1/2 plus 1/4 is also 1, and 1/8 plus 3/8 plus 3/8 plus 1/8 is 1. Okay, so one of these has to come up. We've got it, and a 1 is a certain probability. So what's the probability of getting sort of one of these, any one of these situations? Well, it's 100%, right? So that's kind of the idea there. Okay, so that's one example of a tree diagram. Let's look at another example, okay, one that might be kind of familiar. Let's imagine you have an iPod and or some sort of audio player device, and you've got a playlist on there. You've made your own playlist, okay, of songs, and we're going to call these songs tracks 1, 2, and 3. All right, I'm not going to name them, but you can fill in the blank with your favorite songs, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, you can even try this with your music player and make a playlist. But let's say you like track 2 so much that you're going to put track 2 on there again. So your playlist goes 1, 2, 3, 2. Okay, maybe it's, I don't know, I'm not going to say song names. But imagine you like whatever song track 2 is, you like that so much, you put it back on there again. Okay, and let's say you're maybe on your bus ride, and maybe you live close to school, you've got a short bus ride, and you're going to listen to 2 songs. All right, 2 songs, and it's going to be on random, right? Shuffle. So any of these 4 songs could come up. You just hit the playlist, and your player picks 2 songs to listen to. Okay, so the first song could be any one of those 4, right? It could be 1, 2, 3, or again, there's kind of 2 opportunities to get track 2, right? It could be 1, 2, or 3, and there's 2 chances to get 2. So we put 2 on the tree diagram twice. Now you're going to play another song. Another song's going to come up. And this time, so let's say, for example, you heard track 1 the first time around, okay? The way that these players work usually, at least with mine, the ones I've had and the ones I've seen, you don't hear song 1 again. It goes through the playlist. You might have it on repeat, but it's going to go through the whole playlist before it comes back to 1 again. So the next song it can be anything but track 1. It could be 2, 3, or it could be 2 again. There's two chances. Sort of 2 opportunities to hear track 2, because you've got it on there twice, right? Okay, and then if you heard so what this is called without replacement, okay? Because what we're doing is the second time around, unlike the coin flip where you get heads and tails the first time, and then you can get heads and tails the second time as well. Here we can no longer get whatever happened the first time. We can't get that anymore because of just the nature of the iPod and things like that. Okay, and there's lots of different scenarios where this can happen. This kind of thing can happen, besides just music on an MP3 player. So this is called without replacement because it's kind of like that 1 is no longer back in the mix anymore on the second song. Okay, so if we listen to track 2, then if this track 2 comes up the first time, then the next time could be 1, 3, or again 2 because it's on there twice, right? Okay, if it's track 3. Then we could do 1, 2, or 2, and if it was the second track 2, then we could hear 1, 2, or 3, right? Okay, 1, 2, and 3 are all options again. So let's look at the when we have this now. Let's look at all these options. Okay, here we had track 1 and then track 2, 1 and 2, 1 and then 3. 1, 3. So we're writing out the combinations here. Okay, you don't always have to do this, but when you're first starting out with tree diagrams, it can help. Okay, so we've got all the combinations here: 2 and then 1. Okay, 2 and then 3, 2 and then 2, and then 3 and then 1, and so on and so forth. These kind of pairs are all sort of the different options of what might come up if you listen to 2 songs out of the 4 available on this playlist. Okay, once you've got this, you can answer some different kinds of questions. Okay, and the sort of questions you might be asked about this is, what is the probability of hearing track 2? Okay, when you made this playlist, you put track 2 on there twice because you wanted it to be more likely that you would hear it. So let's see if that actually works out. Well, how many times in all this do you actually hear track 2? Okay, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we hear it twice, right? That's fine, you hear it. Okay, not in that one. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 times out of a total of 12, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? 10 out of 12, okay? Which, of course, reduces to 5/6. And then a lot of times with probability, we want to put it in terms of a percentage. So 83% chance. You've got an 83% chance of hearing track 2 at all. Whether you hear it once or twice, 83% of the time you're going to hear it. Okay, or every 5 out of 6 times. Okay, so there's your answer to the question. That's pretty likely. That's pretty good odds that you're going to hear it. Okay. How about hearing only track 2? So hearing track 2 twice in a row. Okay. So where does that happen? It happens right here, track 2 and then track 2, and also down here, track 2 and then track 2. Okay, so that's 2 out of 12 times, right? So 1/6, 1 every 6 times, or 17% of the time. So almost, yeah, 1 out of it is not almost, but pretty much 1 out of 6 times that you do this, you're going to hear only track 2. So that's interesting. Okay, how about hearing track 1 and 2? Say number 1 is maybe your next favorite. You like it a little better than 3. And how many times are you going to hear tracks 1 and 2? Okay, here's 1. Here's another, so that's 2. 3, 2 and 1. Okay, so that's 3 times. That doesn't happen here. And then 4 times. So that happens 4 times. 4 out of 12 times, or 1/3. Once every 3 times you do this, you will hear tracks 1 and 2. So, I don't know, interesting little experiment here. If you want to, this is something you can try it on your own. If you like certain songs better than others, but you still want to hear a bit of variety, then this is an interesting thing to play around with. And this is a great example of when a tree diagram kind of helps you to figure out what's going on here. That's it for now. We'll see you next time. Good luck.